Hi, everyone. I'm going to just share this real quick. Let's see. I'm basically going live on YouTube instead of going live on Facebook so that I can share this later with my Patreon. And if you'd like to join my Patreon, it is at Patreon, P-A-T-R-E-A-R-E. Oh, goodness. I'm sorry. Spelling out loud is not my forte. My Patreon is patreon.com/Holly, HOLLY day, DAI. And I am creating a whole bunch of things there. Mostly I'm making clothing. I'm making a lot of vintage items. Right now I'm working on creating like a Queen of Hearts little remake of a thrifting store thing. And then I'm actually going to be doing some velvet painting. And so what we're going to do is, hi, Kelsey. What we're going to do is actually take velvet and then set it up for a picture. My plan for that is to kind of help you get an outline of a face without actually having to do like the whole face. So you're not having to have all the skills to, oh, it's nice to see you all. But you don't have to have those skills to be like a perfect drawer to get this done. It's more about the body. Some of the research I've been doing on it has actually been looking at swimsuit models because a lot of that, you can kind of imagine what the body would look like in that way. Right now I'm working on cutting some things. So I use, right now I'm doing a skirt. This is a hem facing. So whenever you're doing a skirt that's not lined and it's going to show, you have to do like a facing inside. It kind of helps create the edge without having to do a serged edge. And this is part of the skirt, and it's a contrast. So the skirt, the dress is actually going to be this really pretty blue color, and then I'm going to have the white contrast because I'll have to show you the fabric is actually this wonderful sheen. So it's got this blue color and then the white. So the dress is going to be mostly made out of this sheen here. And so what I'm using is I have a giant table that my husband made. And what he did is he took 2 IKEA cases and put them on a wooden platform and then basically used some like screws to make sure that they stayed together. And then we put the bigger piece of wood on top. And I'm very tall. I'm 5'10". So having to make it so that I'm standing without shoes on and that I'm not like leaning over too much or anything because it's really uncomfortable. But it also is big enough to have all this wide material. My favorite tool right now is this electric rotary cutter. There isn't a brand name. We totally got it on Amazon and it just is magic. What's cool about it is I could do this. Hold on, I'm like scared for a second. Okay, ready to watch a live bloodstream? Just kidding. You can do this, and it's not going to actually cut me because this is not where the blade is. It's not just, it won't cut just by doing this. The fabric actually goes between here. So it'd be like, I'm not going to do it with this piece of pattern, but it'd be in between that little section. And so you don't actually need to have a cutting board to do anything. I do still have a cutting board. Hold on, I got to get my kitten. You want to see her? She snuck in here when I walked in. So here's Pepper. And she snuck in. And she's saying hi. And now she's got to go because you can't have cat hair all over the fabric. She's not very happy about that. Okay, go bye. Go play. Anyway, so that blade is really nice. So I still have like the cutting table stuff on the bottom, but I only use it when I'm like really stuck. And what's cool about this is it feels like you couldn't like really do curves, but you could actually cut just by like rotating your arm without worrying about it too much. So you could cut around curves a lot easier. So I'm going to do some demo of just this real quick to kind of show. I have, it's kind of hard to see white on white, but I have my pattern here. And a lot of people get like these really fancy paper weights or fabric weights, and they spend a lot of money at the fabric store to get fancy paperweights, and it's stupid because these are just really big, heavy, I don't even know what they are. They're from the Home Depot, and they're super heavy, but they're like washers of some sort, like big metal washers, and I use those instead. And I totally copied, I went to Portland Fashion Institute for a couple of supplementary classes just for fun, and they had a bunch of these, and I was like, that's brilliant. Why do you need to have fancy or expensive weights? You don't need that. The only thing with this is that I can't put these too close to where I'm cutting because it doesn't lift up correctly. So I'm just gonna get through here. And I can just turn it. It's so smooth and easy. I kind of missed right there. So I'm gonna go back over it. Okay. And then I just move it a little bit so that I'm not going to run into the metal, because that would be pretty awful. Okay. A lot of people also like to pin their patterns. I don't see that it's the necessary reason to do that. Okay. All right. So now I've got one of the facings, and it's nearly perfect. So I'm just going to do the other one real quick. I'm also making like a winged bust thing. That's not very descriptive, but basically it's a vintage dress that has like wing bust right here. And it's not a pattern that I'm copying, the pattern that I created, but what you can do to make your own is actually really simple, but it kind of involves a little bit of math. So whenever you sew, a lot of the patterns are already based out of, sometimes when I pick this up, I end up turning it on. Hold on, let me get through this real quick. This will save your arms and your back when you're cutting things. So here's this facing. So a lot of patterns have this built-in part in it where they tell you right in the beginning of the instructions, if it doesn't say anything, then there's already a 5/8 seam allowance. What a seam allowance is it's where you're supposed to sew. So you could potentially mark it out, but the patterns have it built in, and they expect you to sew about here, 5/8 on the line. And so if you decide to do any kind of trimming, it's the best way is to always sew that, because then you can let it out if you needed to. But say you wanted to insert something. So if I wanted to, for some reason, put blue just in this piece, I'd want to not just have cut this whole piece out, because I need to add 5/8. Like if I cut the line here, I would need to add 5/8 to it so I could sew it correctly. Does that make any sense? Anyway, so I did that with some of my pattern pieces where I wanted to put in this busty, bullety thing where I added it into an existing pattern. So I have to make 4 of these, and that's going to be the wing. And I like to just double a lot of crap so that I don't have to cut so much. That's going to fit. But I do want to make sure that the grain is correct so that I don't have it wonky. If you cut something on a different grain, it could affect the way that it falls or stretches. So if you cut it diagonally, like a skirt, or you don't pay attention, a lot of these patterns have these lines on them. And these lines actually are to help you indicate how you're supposed to set the pattern. And when you set the pattern, it's supposed to align with the grain, okay? So that way, like sometimes a pattern piece, for example, this one, it looks like you would just do it straight, but see there's a diagonal, so I'd actually have to set it to the grain so that the grain, it was like that. And that's how you figure out how to place your patterns. When you set them incorrectly, you could affect the way that they stretch, or maybe they were supposed to stretch and you didn't follow the grain and now they don't because you didn't put it on the right area. All these pieces also are going to have an interfacing, and I can say that when I first started making stuff, I have a lot of, oh no, I could do it without reading the instructions kind of mentality. And I would be like, interfacing. When did it say interfacing on the back of the envelope? I don't need interfacing. But interfacing is actually really important, and it helps things work a lot better, and also ironing. So if it has interfacing and you've bought all the things but you didn't buy interfacing, you're going to have to go out and get it, because really it'll make everything look so much better. And it basically helps strengthen and stiffen pieces. You know, like if you're doing a collar on a men's shirt and it needs to be a little more stiff because it has to have that structure so it doesn't crumple in the wash. I'm doing interfacing on these pieces of the skirt so that they keep their structure, so they're not going to crumple when you're wearing them, or they're going to hold that circular motion of the fabric of the skirt. So I'll get this real quick. I need 4 of these. I'm only cutting 2 right now. I'm cutting 2, but at a time. I'm going to put the weight on it though, because I want to make sure I don't mess it up. I think I spend almost all the days that I have available when I'm not working a day job doing stuff like this. I don't think I'm going to be able to fit another one on this. So this is all scrap. I'm going to get rid of it. I used to hold on to a lot of scrap, but you know, just what are you going to do with a bunch of scrap sometimes? So here's the wing. I've got 2 of them. I need 4, so I need 2 more. This is more scrap. And before I can do anything, I also need, oh, this is one of the cut pieces. This side. That'd be really fun if I cut the cut piece. Just kidding. And I'm going to need to cut the interfacing after this. Let me show you what that looks like. It is actually important, like this interfacing is directional. Like a lot of things is directional. Fit this on here. I love to save space. So I have like this much, this little like curvature here, and I haven't cut it off. Like even though like I'm not about keeping scraps, I try to make things fit as much as possible so I can use this little space. Okay. All right, so there is the other pieces. And I don't need any more white fabric. Put this away real quick. And then I'm going to grab my interfacing. So I buy interfacing in bulk because I make a lot of stuff, but you don't necessarily need to do that. A lot of patterns will have the amount that you need on the back of it. Of interfacing, you probably just didn't notice when it talked about yardage. It also talked about how much you need in interfacing. And then you can go to the store. I typically use this Allowance. It's oddly stupid to get right now because, well, it's not stupid, but because it's been being used as like a filter for the pandemic. People are using it as like a little extra safety because of its non-wovenness, but you can still breathable. So they're using it in masks. And so some places, I don't know if they're still doing it right now, but some places like Joann's are having a limit on how much that you can buy. I've got probably another 25, probably got another like 15 yards of this right now. The other thing about interfacing is it doesn't come, the way that a lot of fabrics do. So fabric usually comes, this is what we call the width. You know, whenever you're trying to figure out like what that means on the back of a pattern, like say, for example, let's grab a pattern here. Okay. And this pattern says 40, it says dress right here. It says 45 inches, 60 inches. And then it gives you the numbers, and you're supposed to correspond with the sizes with the numbers to know how much fabric you need. But the sizes on a pattern are not the same as the size in a store. So if you're a size 8 in a store, you do not want to buy a size 8 dress pattern because it's actually not the same. A lot of times on the top, they have what it is. And so this is really important. I think that I wish that like patterns are more, or even dresses were more telling about, even for men, like having, they do it more for men where they have chest sizes and they actually tell you the inches so you can figure out what it is. And for women, a lot of times they don't know what their actual bust size is, but this is really important because it helps you determine which pattern size you should get. So when you're looking at it, if you got a size 8 and you're like, oh yeah, it's actually on the pattern is for a 31-inch bust. That's not a size 8. A size 8 is probably more like 36-inch bust. So you're really a size 14 in the pattern. Okay, so that's really important to look at before you buy this. I have absolutely bought a pattern and then cut it out being like, I'm a size 8 or I'm a size 6 or whatever, or I'm a size 17. Doesn't really matter. And I cut it out, started sewing it and been like, this is too small because I made an assumption that the sizes on the pattern are the same as at the store. So say that you're actually a 14. Okay. So we figured out that actually the 14 means that you're a 36-inch bust, a 28-inch waist, and a 38-inch hip. And you're looking at this part, it says 45. Let's see if you can see it. It says 45 and 60. So the 45 and the 60 are telling you what the width of the fabric is. And that's how long this is. So that will tell you, and you can find this on all fabrics right here. It'll tell you the width on almost all fabrics. And so you can look at your pattern. It can be like, oh, this fabric is 42 inches in width. I need 1.5 yards. But for interfacing, unfortunately, it almost always only comes in 20 inches of width, which is stupid, but it is what it is. And most garment companies know that it's 20 inches in width. So this one, let's see, does it have any, this one doesn't have any facing, but let's say this one I'm sure it does. So this one says on the facing, contrast facing, it says interfacing. It says 7/8 of a yard of 20 to 25-inch medium weight fusible, such as Pellon. So usually they are helpful and they can tell you, you know, obviously you only need 7/8 of a yard of the 20-inch fusible interfacing. And that helps because that's supposed to be for the pant welt or for the tuxedo parts to make it that crisp. Otherwise, it doesn't get as crisp. So for this, again, for the skirt, I'm using almost exactly the same pieces I cut out in the white. And I kind of have to think about it because with this skirt, kind of have to show you, this piece is, I have to think about it every single time. Goes like this, okay? And I want the fabric, this part is going to be white. This is going to be the skirt, and it's all blue. It's going to be the white. But this side needs to be the facing because it's fusible. So I need to cut it so that the glue is the right way. I have cut this wrong before, but to help me figure this out, it's texture, the interfacing. And so one side's nice and smooth and the other side's textured. And the textured side is usually, if it's fusible, is the glue side. And I know that I'm going to have to put the glue side like this. So for me, I almost always cut it exact, like if this is a pattern, this is only one piece, I cut it with the writing and the glue side here. If you cut it opposite, you'll end up cutting the wrong section. I'm not sure how much sewing you all have had, but you'll come to a point where you think you're brilliant and you'll cut, it'll say cut two, but they don't mean cut two, they mean cut two on each side, because this side is one piece and then this side is the other piece. And if you cut two of these, this won't fit on this side. So sometimes it involves a little more thinking, and definitely my recommendation is to not try to cut things when you're very sleepy, when you're too drunk, or you've been doing it for a long time. And also allow yourself forgiveness that you're going to make a mistake. I've been sewing since I was 17. I don't even want to say how many years that is. Wait, how old am I? I've been sewing for almost 20 years. I'm not 37, I'm 36. I'm going to tell you, whatever, I don't care. And I've been sewing since I was 17. And I almost sew, like at least for 5 years, I sewed on a daily basis. And except for this pandemic year where I have had to take a step back only because income-wise, people aren't buying all the dresses, or they're not getting all the sewing things. And I understand, because we're all in a different kind of sense of financial instability, possibly. So I've had to take a day job, and so I don't get to sew every day like I was, but I still make mistakes all the time. All the time I make mistakes. And my favorite thing to use is a seam ripper, because I'm constantly being like, oh, great, I sewed that, or I'll sew in a crevice in something that you're not supposed to, or you'll miss a stitch, or maybe sometimes it's the machine and the machine will eat something. But I've been doing this for 20 years and I almost always make a mistake. And that's okay, as long as you can recognize your mistakes, be patient with yourself, forgive yourself, and then try again. I currently, I'm going to talk too much while I'm cutting, but I currently work with someone who is a little less experienced than me, but I feel like they're learning a lot. And I see them make mistakes, and I'll find them maybe before they do, obviously, because I've used them or did it a lot. But they also are learning on recognizing when there's something wrong with what they did, and just allowing that forgiveness to be like, okay, I messed it up. It's okay. Just going to take it out. I'm going to redo it. And then, you know, with time, there's other things that you can do to help prevent mistakes. And one of those is being like making what's called a muslin. And a muslin is basically a test garment. And the goal is to buy cheap fabric that is in similar weave, usually similar kind of texture. Like say you're making a cotton dress, you want to buy like a cotton dress. If you're making a polyester, you want to try to do it in a polyester. That way you can kind of know how it's going to lay, or how you're going to mess up on it. Or if it's the first time you're doing a garment, how are you going to get that together, or is it going to fit? You know, I made a bunny play suit, and as someone who's really tall, the sizes on the envelope said this is going to fit me, and I put it on, and it was just like right up the crack, you know. So like you, it's kind of the way you can test it and know, okay, well, this pattern isn't really true to size, and a lot of patterns, unfortunately, aren't. And if you go straight from, if you're using a pattern that you don't feel like you know, or that you haven't used before, or that you feel like, you know, in general, like I find men's t-shirts are always way too big, but like the people that buy men's shirts for me like them a little more fitted. And when they say 47 inches on there, they fit more like the size up than they usually do. So it is good to try to do a test one. And I know it seems tedious because you're like already having to do so much work because you're doing the same work, but you could skip steps like finishing the seams because you're not going to wear this, or it could be, we call them wearable muslins if you try to wear it later, but you can skip finishing the seams. You can skip putting the buttons on exactly. You can really terribly put in a zipper and know that you're going to tear that zipper out, so it's not going to have to be perfect, but that way you can at least zip it up and see if it fits, and then you have it all ready for you. There are some really great companies that I think in general have true to size, at least for dresses for women, and that is Gertie's Charm patterns, which are different than the patterns that she has done for Butterick. I feel that the Butterick patterns, they're hit or miss because sometimes they are too big, one size too big, and sometimes they're perfect, but it can depend on the pattern. So usually for those ones, I do like to do a muslin. And the reason for that is that Butterick is a corporation company, and they probably do their sizing through some computer program. And they actually, Butterick, Simplicity, and McCall's are not different companies. They're all, and Berta, they're all owned by the same conglomerate. So they started out as different companies that were all bought. It's really a monopoly. And I don't feel that badly about it, only because they're not that expensive, I guess, because Joann's, you go in there every once in a while and get the $1.99 deals, and you're like, okay, that's fine with me. But, you know, I mean, it does make it hard for probably more independent pattern makers because they're only able to pitch to those companies, you know, or they're having their own things. So Gertie's Charm patterns are her own creation, and she actually made this dress. So this is Gertie, and then this is her Butterick pattern. And she has other patterns that you can buy in an envelope, or you can purchase with a PDF. And usually I've purchased them with a PDF, and then you print them all out. You have to have a printer, or you can buy the PDF and you can send out for someone else to print them for you. But regardless, they're pretty fairly good. Her instructions are more extensive and more readable than any Simplicity pattern, which I feel that sometimes reading those patterns is like learning a foreign language. And I love to do like maybe a sew along on like learning how to read a pattern, because the reading it is almost harder than actually making it sometimes, because you're trying to translate what they mean and then try to do it. And half the time I don't like, what are they talking about? The other thing, so those are really great, but then you want to do that mock-up, and that can help you with your less mistakes, because the worst thing is having to go out and you buy this amazing, beautiful fabric that maybe you can never get again because it's the last of the roll, you can't find it, you don't know the name, and then you cut it up, you can't uncut it. You know, you can't unring that bell once you've done it. So it is kind of good to do that mock-up. And then people are like, well, what does it matter if I cut something bigger to size? It's so much easier if I can make it smaller. But actually, if you look at a pattern piece, especially one that is manufactured, and what's nice about them is you could see the different sizes. You could see that the smaller sizes usually are cut differently, or they're cut more in, and you can't go back and recut it. So you can try to slim it down, but it's just not the same. The other thing that I don't do, I have a lot of things about time. Like I want to make things as quick as possible. And I've learned a lot making them quick. And a lot of that, like, so for example, for this, I have these weights on here and I'm not pinning it. Some people pin the fabric, and you can do that. But I think not only is it a waste of time to pin everything, it's a complete waste of time. But if you're pinning your fabric to this, you need to at least know how to pin it correctly. And the way that you lay things out needs to be as flat as possible. And this also includes when you're pinning something. So the best thing to do is to have really, really sharp pins. I am constantly losing my pins. I have no idea. I need to buy more pins. I'm constantly losing them. I'm constantly bending them, but I like them really sharp. And how I was taught was by a professional seamstress. When you're putting in pins, you don't lay them along here. Okay. Now this is for if you're pinning the pattern to, just don't pin the pattern to the piece. Don't do that. Stop doing that. You don't need to do that. Just put a weight on it and cut it, because you're going to ruin your pattern paper and you want to keep those, because what if you want to make that dress again? Don't do that anymore. But say you were pinning this to something else. And say I was pinning this together to a seam. I don't want to actually pin it straight like this. So that's going this way. I'll get a one that's here. I'll get this one. This is not a sharp pin, unfortunately, but you can see the head. So I don't want to do it like this. Okay, because one, it's going to be harder for you to sew, and you're going to have a harder time seeing where it's going to be at. You actually want to pin it where you want to make sure you're doing it as flat as possible, and you want to pin it out where the pin comes out of the seam. That way, as you're sewing, you can easily pull the pin out. And if you sew over your pins, stop doing that. Don't do it. Don't do it anymore, because you'll break your machine. You will one day, not only will you break your needle, but you will hit your pin, push your pin into the foot of your machine, and then you'll probably have to go either, if you can get it out, good luck. You might have also messed up your timing, which is really important for the machine to go together. And you've just made a mess, and you've probably eaten part of your fabric. So don't sew over your pins, okay? Some people do that because they have very thin, very sharp pens, and they have very sharp machines, and they're very experienced. But in general, like, they need to be thin. They need to be thin pins. And you want to do it very rarely, because you could just really mess up your machine. So don't sew over pins. And I don't even use pins for sewing most of the time, because it takes too long. I don't want to pin it all. So as you get more experienced, you can get used to understanding where that 5/8 seam allowance is, and sew without having to pin it at all. I'm going to finish cutting this out. I'm going to cut one more piece out here, and then I'm going to move to the sewing machine and do a little bit of sewing before I sign off. I feel like this is a lot of information, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to cut this real quick so I can get moving along. Ooh. All of this stuff that I've learned about sewing is just from years of experience. Some of it I learned at the Portland Fashion Institute, but I had already been sewing for, God knows how long. I had already been sewing for a long time, and I just wanted to learn some extra techniques. Didn't cut this super well, but I'm going to serge this, so I don't really care. Serging is an excellent tool. And I'll tell you, I have no idea how to thread a serger. I'm totally a cheat. I have the most amazing machine that kind of does it for me. So I kind of feel bad, because I really don't know how to serge beyond what it's doing. And what I mean by that is, serger is this machine that usually does these wonderful edges where you're doing like this finished piece, and it keeps the fabric from fraying without having to finish it or roll it up like a hem. And most sergers, they have 4 strings. They have 2 needles. They have an upper looper and a lower looper, 2 needles, and they use 4 cones of whatever. And when you thread it, every machine is a little bit different, but they have to, where is this other pattern piece? There it is. You have to thread it in order. And by that, I mean you have to start with the 1 cone, 2 cone. I only have to do 2 of these. So I'm just going to fold this over. And if you don't thread it in order, it won't sew. It'll get knotted. It's so annoying. And then beyond that, each single thread goes through a tension spring, and the tension helps determine how hard it's pulling through. That's what tension is. It kind of helps you figure out to go through the string so the string doesn't unwind. And you have to figure out 4 of them. And each kind of stitch is different. So, you know, a manual is really important. And then you also have to figure out different tensions depending on how the weight or the way that your fabric feels. So say you're serging fur is a lot thicker, and I'm talking about like faux fur, it's a lot thicker than serging silk. And so you have to do a lot of adjustments. So not only do you have to make sure that you put it in the right order, but you have to do all the tensions, and you know, and then just pray it works. You know, I had a Singer for a while. I don't recommend Singer machines usually. I don't know if I recommend a Singer serger. That's for sure. I don't know. But Singers are usually the machines that you find in, I need to find this one other piece. Find in a Joann's. And honestly, Singers used to be like the top of the line, like what you wanted to have as far as an all metal machine for sewing. But they are not good machines anymore. Okay, so this won't fit on here. It actually needs to be like this. This is, so I have a piece, this piece, I'm sorry, I'm breaking away from my serger talk, but this piece is too long for interfacing. It's okay if you cut the interfacing and just add more on the tail, because this is going to go on the inside, and interfacing you don't need to worry about the edging unraveling, because it's not going to. It's going to be glued on there. It's going to be on the inside. So I'm just going to do as much as I can. And then I'm going to add a little bit more on the edge. Anyway, so sergers, though, they're very specific. They're very whiny, but you can do some cool things with them, like a rolled hem. And a rolled hem you usually see on like napkins, like really fancy napkins. They're the edging, you know. I used to use a serger a lot on the roll hem part of a chiffon panel skirt for burlesque. So that's how I would do chiffon, because chiffon is such a terrible, it's a beautiful flowy fabric, but it's really unravelly. And if you've ever had a fabric where you cut it and you're just like, all this, you just breathe on it and all the threads start coming out of it, that's where a serger is really helpful. The other thing is that when you finish your edges, so the reason why they use pinking shears, which I don't know if you've heard of pinking shears, but they are like, think about crafting when you're in kindergarten, and then those scissors that have like the jagged edges that you do like cool little shapes on. When you cut a fabric on the bias, and that means the diagonal, it's almost exactly the 45 of the grain, it is less likely to unravel. And that's just usually how fabric is, because on the grain, it's pulling all the threads apart. And on the bias, it's not pulling it as easily. So using pinking shears is like having little bias cuts on your edges to help them from fraying. And that's one technique. Or, you know, what I do is I have a serger. My serger is thoughtless, because I don't have to think about what order I put the strings in, and I don't have to think about the tension. It doesn't even allow me to set the tension. And I don't mind that, because it thinks for me, and it's basically like having a Cadillac for sergers. And it is really expensive, but if you end up doing a lot of sewing, it's so freaking worth it. I have 2 of them now, and I actually found one of these. They're called Baby Lock Imagines. There's a couple other versions. There's like the Imagine, basically you're looking for the Baby Lock that doesn't have serger or the tension numbers on them. And there's a couple of them. I found one 30 minutes away from me. I drove all the way out there because I was like, I'm getting this for $100 on Facebook Market. And I took it into my local store, my local sewing store. And I had them fix it up for $200. And that was a $300 machine. Worth it, because that machine, if they were to sell it in the store, if they had found that, they would have sold it for $800. Brand new, those machines go for $2,500. I bought the machine 8 years ago for $1,500. So they're really like, they last forever. And if you service them, they're just amazing. But you can totally find one inexpensively. And I actually helped someone in Seattle. I saw one on Craigslist and was like, this is only $300. You should get that. Like, they're worth it. And they're worth fixing up because of this whole non-thinking serging kind of technique. But I'm going to have to serge these in a second first. Part of my sewing is to finish the edges first. Because it is way easier to have the finished edges before I actually sew them, so I don't have to go back and try to compete with edges that are sewn together. Most times when you sew, you're supposed to you're supposed to sew it, finish the edge, sew it, finish the edge, sew it, finish the edge. Okay. So this is the piece that I didn't have enough on the edge. I'm just going to do this and cut a little more. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to actually just iron it on there and fix it post. Pretty big deal. All right. So I have to heat up my iron because before I can start sewing, I have to put all this interfacing together. I always get to save these pieces because there's always going to be small pieces later that need it. Oops. All right, so let's see. I have this piece. Rearranging. It takes forever sometimes just to cut out the fabric. I think the longest part about sewing is getting all your pieces, especially determining with your pattern pieces. A lot of times I take pattern pieces. Is this on? No. I take pattern pieces. I just touched an iron. It's fine. You can see me in the mirror. Hey, what's up, mirror? Anyway, I usually actually take copies of all my pattern pieces so that if I change sizes, I don't have to go buy the size again. So I buy like medical paper that you use at the doctor's, and I buy that and I put it over top of the pattern, and I use those weights and I trace out my size. And this also prevents, like, if you thought you had the wrong size later, this prevents me from having to go and buy the pattern 5 times. And so it is efficient for people who are doing it at home too, because then, you know, what if they love that dress they made or that thing they made, and now that doesn't fit them and they want to make something else, but then they have to go out and find the pattern and the pattern's discontinued. It's such a bummer when that happens. So here is, where's the white piece? There it is. To put all the interfacing on. The instructions for interfacing are for you to like dampen the fabric and then iron it on high heat. I do that. Sometimes I don't always dampen it all the time. I just use a lot of high heat. And usually I lay down, I'm going to show you my setup real quick. I have an ironing board that slides in to my cutting board, and I'll lay this down and I make sure, which I've done this before wrong, that this is the textured side, this is the smooth side, because if this is the textured side on the other side, I'm going to accidentally iron the interfacing to my ironing board, which I have done. But making sure I don't do that. And then I don't iron directly onto the interfacing. I'll place my fabric that it's supposed to be on. So this is the piece that I need the interfacing on. And then I'm going to iron these two together. Okay. You can kind of see. Whatever. Let me know. This is so much information. You could like teach classes on sewing or just have like a sewing day of just all the things. Maybe I should do a sew along. Okay, so my iron is thinking about it. It's still not hot. Oh no, there's glue on my iron. All right, so I have to pause because there is hot glue on my iron. And my iron is hot. So it is always good to check your iron. And then if you have a problem and you have crap on your iron like I do, you can grab spare fabric. And this is called hot iron cleaner. And honestly, it's the best. It's unfortunate that there's hot glue on here, but luckily it's really hot. So I'm just going to take a smidgen of this stuff and I'm going to clean my iron real quick. And it's really hot, so I'm just going to make sure that I don't leave my hands on there for too long. This will also help if you have any iron marks. It kind of smells good, but you can see like it gets real dirty and stuff. And I just use scrap fabric. You can use a cotton towel, which is probably the best thing, but I am a resourceful person using whatever I have. I'm going to clean the sides and just try not to iron yourself. Cool. Now I've got my iron clean. This iron is really rad. It's a little pricey, but again, I'm like all about using all the tools that you can, because when you sew a lot, you get tired. You've noticed like it's sitting like up like this, but it has these, so you can see it when I let go, it has this little pop out motion because I actually don't set my iron like this. I always leave it down and then it pops up from the table. So I don't actually have to, it's never going to iron it. Now, if I could turn this option off and you can get in a lot of trouble that way, but you can just basically be ironing. It goes down. You're like, oh, the doorbell. And then it's already up. I tend to leave my iron on all the time, unfortunately, but it does have an auto shut off. And the way to turn it on is just by touching it. And then it goes, oh yeah, I'm awake. I can do the thing. So, all right. So I'm going to iron this real quick. Just a lot of boobs. Just kidding. It's not. All right. This is white too. So it's really good I cleaned that first so I don't get any white or like smudgy stuff on there. And you could spray it. Have some water in there. It makes it even hotter. Just going to lay it out. Just keep moving it along. I usually start with one side at a time and go down it because things can shift. And if I try to start from like both sides, it's weird, but I'll end up like getting some sort of like bubble hole or something like, or bubbly thing in the middle. White is so, it just picks up all the lint that you can find. And I have a life and I have dogs and I have cats. And so sometimes it's hard to keep everything perfect. Okay. There it is. Try to keep this under an hour. But I will be sewing for a while, but there's a lot of information in here. Okay. Give some more heat. The water helps it steam a little more. I can hear my dog barking. Sorry, I don't know what, maybe there's someone at my door. I'm gonna leave it. Olive, hey, stop it. We got mail. Okay. Just trying to evenly get this all nice and straight. You can see like where the fold is, it's going to just go away. I love interfacing, especially after pre-washing something. And then you iron it to interfacing and all of a sudden it's just like perfect. I do always pre-wash my fabrics. And fabrics have a different way, like you're supposed to treat your fabrics the way that you want them to be treated. So if you plan on only dry cleaning, you're supposed to dry clean your fabrics if you're going to only dry clean it. If you are going to be putting it straight in the washing machine, you should put it in the washing machine before you sew it. because you can have shrinkage, and that way you've already gotten the shrinkage out. So I do pre-wash all my fabrics before I sew with them, unless they're specialty fabrics that maybe can't be pre-washed. This Shaheen is so specific. It can't be pre-washed. The way that this will have to be cleaned is through spot cleaning and light, basically hand washing. So I hand washed it, but you have to be very careful because it is silk screening and the fabric is from the 70s. So, I didn't want it to do any fading. And I have a piece of fabric, and look, I'm going to let this iron go. I have a piece of fabric that someone gave me that they had gotten and gave to me. I'm going to try to restore it, but let me just show you that they washed it normally. And it is this beautiful Shaheen. I'm just making a mess now. That's my next project, is that yellow. Nope, I'm just making a mess now. Oh, it's down here. No, that's not it. This is what sewing is for someone with ADHD. Constantly being like, oh, wait, I'm going to think of this thing. Okay, so here is, oh my goodness. So here is the fabric that someone clearly put in a washing machine. Okay, and you can see like it's really faded. This fabric normally, and this is the purple, right? But this fabric normally is brilliant colored, and it's hand printed. Here's the same print, but in pink, and you can see how dark those golds are, and you can see how they just washed away because someone put this in the wash. So it's unfortunate because that piece basically is ruined. I'm going to try maybe hand painting it, but it is important to kind of take care of your pieces the way you want them to be. And especially if sometimes on fabrics, it'll tell you how it needs to be cared for. And this fabric had a tag that said, do not dry clean, do not wash in the washing machine, do not put heat on, do not iron directly. So I don't know if at some point someone got it and was like, oh, I'll just wash it, and then they, ruined it, or if it just, happened. But you got to be careful with your fabrics, especially if it's a specialty fabric. I'm going to do the backside real quick just to make sure there's no bubbles. Ironing takes so long. It's essential though. Not only should you get an iron, but when it tells you to iron the seams, you should iron the seams. Such a good idea. My battery just said low, but don't worry, I have a plug. Ta-da! No longer low. All right. Yeah, so I mean, I also am guilty of feeling lazy about ironing my seams. And when I started ironing them, I made better dresses. I made better garments. And a lot of it had to do with having a better iron. Better tools make me feel like I can do things more. The other things that are really important to have with your iron are not only as an ironing board, this one's really convenient because it comes out of a machine. I don't have to keep setting it up, but having this or this, and this is what's called a ham. And this is a arm sleeve, an iron sleeve. And this helps you iron curves so that you can actually get in there and iron them correctly. I do use my ham a lot. I use it sometimes even when I'm not doing a curve, just because I know where it's been. I know what's going on with it, and it just makes me feel safer to use it. Or it's just quick. I have totally put the ham on my lap and ironed and then burned myself. Just don't do what I do, which is a lot of klutziness. So it's fine though. I'll experiment and I'll get hurt for you. It's fine. I also have hot glued my hand before. you know, the usual. I think today, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get into, I guess I could break this up and stop this stream and then start another stream. That way you have a part 2. Because I haven't even gotten to the sewing part. That's how long cutting and stuff like that goes. And I did take a couple of, I just almost burned myself. I did take a couple of breaks just talking about general sewing tips. But I think we're about 5 minutes from an hour. And that way, at least you can start with part 1 and you can kind of take those tips and use them as you will, get all your things cut out, and then get all your interfacings ironed on. And then we go to doing all the edging. And like, this is like a little bit bigger than the pieces. It's fine. I'm going to cut all that extra interfacing off. I don't care about that. As long as I cut the actual piece as accurate as I possibly could, that's better. The interfacing, I just cut away. But yeah, so get all your pieces together. Maybe if you want to comment on what you'd like to sew, we can do a sew along, and that'd be pretty fun. If there's a favorite pattern, maybe we should do like a shirt. Or there's a great vintage shirt that looks a lot like this, but it's got like a tie. We could do that. Or I could teach you how to do some grading if it doesn't fit you. I don't know. I also have some patterns for some bullet bras that I've been wanting to do, like a bullet bra sew along. So that could be a possibility. Let me know what you think. Like, what do you sew? What are you interested in making? I know this is more about sewing than it is crafting. I just got some schmutz on my stuff. Whenever that happens, I also keep my handy dandy Tide pin around, and it's like an instant wash. It's usually just temporary, and I can just get it off of there. And smush, I don't even know like half the time where smushy stuff comes from. Like, where did that come from? Who knows? What did I iron? Did I got hot glue on this from doing a project earlier? Probably. And I'm adding the extra piece on here. Anyway, I think I'm going to sign off from here and maybe start another stream. And that way you have a chance to start from where we're actually sewing, and go from there. And hopefully you like these tips and tricks, and hopefully it helps you. And let me know if you want to do something else. All right.